The beginning of the film is in the Benito Juarez shelter. It was a few days after it had rained, and so the tents were soaked. The children's clothing was still really dirty, but the kids were just playing around in the camp. And the beginning of the film focuses on them playing around, like eating ice cream and playing hopscotch, and it really has this sort of juvenile innocence to it, but it's contrasted with their stories, which are stories of extreme hardship, not only from their hometowns, but on the journey in order to get to Tijuana.
¿Tú dónde vives?
En Guatemala. Sí. Porque allá los maderos quieren que uno se integre a las maras o si no lo matan.
No quiero que me agarren los policías o que me agarren esos ladrones por trabajar por ellos. No quiero eso.
The second half is actually the day that the border shut down. It almost felt like a war zone at the time.
This is a federal restricted area.
So Kayla, why did you decide to tackle this story from the perspective of these 3 children?
So the reason that I chose this story in particular is because I've been working as a clinical social worker in a shelter that's called Instituto Madre Asunta in Tijuana, and it's a shelter for women and children who, mostly they're seeking asylum. It's also a shelter for people who've been deported from the US. But what we see in our intake assessments and in the therapy sessions is just the extreme amount of trauma that these families have faced, and a lot of them are presenting with symptoms of PTSD, depression, very complex trauma that is a result of the violence that they've experienced, not just at home with their partners because of the gangs trying to recruit their children, but also a state violence and the lack of a response to their suffering. And a lot of times, one story in particular of a woman I'm working with, her husband was killed, and when she tried to go to the police, she was then targeted.
So how did your work as a social worker help you with the filmmaking?
I think it's so important as a filmmaker to really understand the population you're working with before shooting. So instead of just parachuting in and shooting a doc, I think what's really important to me as a visual anthropologist is knowing the population I'm working with beforehand and being able to get their insight. So what is it that you think is important? What's the story you would like to be told? And what would you like other people to know about your experience?
What do you hope people take away after watching your documentary?
I hope that people see the film and really create a sense of empathy for the characters. I hope that it helps people understand that these are not, this isn't a population that people should be afraid of, but instead should be opening their arms and really accepting in, because they are asking for help. This is the legal way for them to be able to obtain that help, and they are going the legal route. Just the amount of hope and resiliency that this population has, they're not defined by their suffering and their struggle, but yet they're stronger because of it. And I think that the resiliency that they have shown is just, it's incredible.
And Kayla Mulholland, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Kayla is one of 15 finalists out of nearly 300 entries for the Migrant Film Festival, which is taking place March 19th.